Hello everyone and welcome to the show. I'm Mike.
I'm Chikling.
And today it's day 2 of our look at how to write in a more realistic way, how to engage your reader. And the way we're doing it here is telling you guys to show, don't tell. Don't tell me what your characters are feeling. Don't just say, Bob is sad. Describe what Bob is doing. Describe his feelings, and then I will be able to figure out, oh, he's sad because you made it personal to me. And that will make me engage with the characters much more than simply being told what they're doing. That's a good tip. Now, do you think you would use that kind of tip for your songwriting?
Of course, I use that all the time actually. Yeah. You don't tell them exactly what's going on with your lyrics.
Absolutely. And I mean, I often think of some of the songs, especially the songs whose words I remember the most. You know, even a song you can hear 20 times, and every time there's that line about the girl looking out the window on the sad gray day. Oh, it hits your heart because you know she's feeling heartache or loss or a broken heart or something, right? It doesn't tell you that she broke up with someone. It just describes her gray day and her feelings. And of course, you remember that. And even years later, it can still hit you in that spot, that place that made you feel and engaged you with that song, that writer, and the character the very first time you heard it. So show, don't tell. It's a very good tip. Now, the problem is, it's fine knowing these tips and understanding the idea. What about actually putting it into your writing? Well, that's what we're going to be looking at a little more today. So let's get some great examples and find different ways that we, as writers who want to improve, can be told to show and not just to tell.
Reading. Improve your writing with show, don't tell. There are several good techniques for showing rather than telling. For one thing, you can write about how the characters are thinking and interacting with their surroundings. For another, you can use dialogue and action. Reading about what a character is saying and doing is usually more interesting for readers than a page of description. Another thing you can do is weave sensory details into the story. Talk about smells, sounds, and tastes. What's in the character's vision? Be careful not to put in too much detail, though. That ends up being more like telling than showing. Keep what's important and omit the rest. Although writers try to show, not tell, it's important to remember that telling isn't always bad. It can be an effective way of giving readers useful information. For example, you don't need to show readers how characters get from one place to another. Just tell them, they took a taxi to the party. If your ambition is to become a writer, you'll need to learn when to show and when to tell.
All right, so here's the great news. We're getting right into it. As we begin the article, it says there are several good techniques for showing rather than telling. Oh, this is good because if we're learning techniques, we're learning a way of doing something, and it turns out there are several ways of doing it. So that's good because it means your writing can be more interesting. You're not always using the same technique to do this. So it gives you a few more tools in your writer's toolbox.
OK， 所以 rather than 就是而不是。好，所以就是对于 showing 这种写作方式有几种很好的方式哦。哪种几种方式呢？
Rather than, of course, sometimes we also say instead of.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of doing it this way, why not do that way? All right, so let's look at one of these techniques. It says, for one thing, you can write about how the characters are thinking and interacting with their surroundings. Yeah, that's a really good example. I guess that kind of relates to the first example from yesterday, right? When we were told Susan is angry or something. That was the telling. But then the showing, what she came in, she slammed a door and her fists, she had tight fists. Now, just by hearing about that and how loud she closed, she slammed the door, and the shape and the feeling of her muscles because she's so angry, we know she's upset, right? So we were describing what she was doing and what the world was doing around her.
所以这边出现的 interact， 它就是有相互影响，或尤其是当互动意思也可以啦。所以 interact with something or someone 就是与谁相互影响或互动。那这边的 surroundings 指的就是环境或者是周围的事物。所以一方面呢，你可以写下人物是怎么思考和与周围的环境去互动的。
All right, here's another one. It says, for another, you can use dialogue and action. Oh, instead of just having Bob was angry, you can talk about Bob coming in and saying, oh my God, I'm going to kill that guy. And then Bob kicks a garbage can or something like that. So we know Bob is upset because of what he's saying and what he's doing, but we don't have to just be told that. You can put it into your dialogue. Good tip. And what is dialogue? Well, dialogue is basically just what the characters in a play, in a book, in a show, in a TV show or a movie, what the characters are saying. So it's not Bob walked into the room. It's Bob said, "Hi, Joe." Joe replied, "Hey, Bob." So when the characters are actually talking to each other, or, of course, when the actors in the play, TV show, or movie are talking to each other, that's the dialogue. All the other stuff about Bob picked up a chair, Bob sat on the chair, on Tuesday morning he drove to the hospital, that's not the dialogue. It's when the characters are talking, the words they're saying, what the actors or actresses will remember and then say as a character. That stuff is all the dialogue. All right, let's look at the example sentence. It says, the action scenes in the movie were good, but most of the dialogue was pretty boring and predictable. So the characters didn't say interesting things, but when they started shooting guns and driving cars, oh, that was the good stuff.
Dialogue 就是书本或者是电影中啊、戏剧中的对话或者是对白。那我们昨天是不是有学到一个单字是 engage？ 那其实可以跟这个字搭配。比如说 to engage in a dialogue 就是进行对话。比如说 the two governments agreed to engage in a comprehensive dialogue to solve the problem。两国政府呢是同意进行全面性的对话来解决问题的。所以文章意思说，另一方面呢，我们还可以使用对话跟动作行为来去形容你的故事。
All right, back to the article. Reading, it says, reading about what a character is saying and doing is usually more interesting for readers than a page of description. That's actually another good point. Yeah, just having the people chat, have a conversation. We can kind of get to know them. We can learn about their relationship. It just makes it more interesting than a simple plain, this is what happened, than a simple plain description. Although descriptions are very useful when you're talking about the scene, when you're talking about the environment, a description for a writer is like using words to make a painting. That's basically what a description is. If I say someone is tall, what color their hair, their eyes are, what shape their face is, things like that, the color and style of their clothing, that is all a description. So we're basically just using words to paint a picture in the reader's mind. For example, Emily gave the police a description of her missing bicycle, the style, the shape, the size, the color, things like that.
所以 description 就是描写或叙述，所以有时候东西很难以言语形容，我们可以说 beyond description， 比如说The mess in Jessie's room is beyond description， 代表 Jessie 的房间一定很乱，乱的好夸张哦。那它是名词，所以动词是 describe， 有描述的意思。所以对于读者来说呢，阅读角色的言行通常是比一整页的叙述还要来得有趣，才不会那么无聊。You don't want your story to be boring.
Exactly. That is the worst thing that can happen, is for people to be bored by your story. So another thing you can do is weave sensory details into the story. Well, that's a pretty complicated way of saying, tell us what the character in the story can see, smell, taste, touch, hearing. Those are the sensory details, but try to weave them into the story rather than just putting them straight on the page and telling us what's going on. Now, to weave in a very practical, real, using my hands way is basically a hobby or a craft. in which you take different things and you wrap them together so that they become a new whole thing. Often when we hear the word weave, we think of clothes, right? They take lots of these long threads and then using a machine by wrapping them around each other, then they can come up with cloth, and that's how we make clothing. Now, when we're talking about weaving things in another way, not in a clothing making kind of way, we're kind of talking about taking separate things and combining them so that they become a nice, new, attractive whole. All right, if you're throwing a party, you want to weave a bunch of different elements together. Good people, good music, good food, good entertainment. Now, if you can weave all those things together and have it just sort of happen in a very natural way, so there's good people, the music's great, the food's over there, the atmosphere is beautiful. If you can weave all that together and create something kind of new and special, and it almost looks like it was made that way, then you've done a very good job. So if you can take these sensory details, as I said, things the characters can smell and hear, and you can kind of make it part of the story without sort of stopping and pointing at it, but just make it part of the story, then you are weaving it together in a very natural way. For example, Martin wove such an incredible story that everyone assumed he was lying. Yes, weave and wove and woven, I believe, are the past tenses of those. Weave. Tell me all about weaving. Can you weave a good description of the word weave into our article?
No.
Oh, all
Can
right,
you
let's
help
move
me?
on.
I'm gonna need your help.
Let's move on.
OK, weave 就是编造，所以它的三态是 weave, wove, woven。所以呢，我们可以指编织上、织布机上的，或者是故事上的编造。只是我们文章中是故事上的编造。那当然哦，a person that weaves, we can call them a weaver.
We do.
哦，
Yes.
织布者。所以其实 Marlene is one of the basket weavers at our factory. Marlene 是我们工厂的一个自然工的其中一员。所以老师刚刚有讲到的 sensory 这个字就是感觉的。其实呢，它就是来自于 sense 这个字，感官。所以你还可以做另外一件事，就是把感官细节编织到故事里面。That sounds so complicated.
Sensory details. What are sensory details? How do you write about them? Well, here's a good way. Talk about smells, sounds, and tastes, right?
Oh.
Most of us know that we have 5 senses, right? Sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. So take those senses, take those things, that information that you're getting from the things around you, and weave that into your story. In other words, talk about smells, sounds, and tastes that the characters can experience in that scene in your story. What's in the character's vision? What can they see around them? Your vision is the ability to see, and also we would use this to describe what you see. If something is within your vision, that means it's there, your eyes can see it. For example, playing a game, Sheila hid behind the door out of her young son's vision. He could not see her at that point.
所以 vision 这边是视野，那也可以有幻觉的意思。比如说 to have a vision of something， 代表你有看到什么东西。比如说 the little boy had a vision of 2 men in black， 只是小男孩看到2个黑衣人，好可怕哦。
Was one of them Will Smith?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
所以谈论气味呢，声音和味道，角色的视野里面有什么，这也是一个很好，这个就是 sensory details。
All right, but here, too much might not be better than just a little bit.
Oh.
You have to be careful with this. It's kind of like adding salt and pepper to your dish.
Okay.
A little bit of salt is fine, but too much can ruin things. So don't put too much sensory detail in there, just enough to give us a good idea. It says, be careful not to put in too much detail, though. That ends up being more like telling than showing, right? So you have to use some judgment. Don't use too much. Keep what's important and omit the rest. So you don't have to describe everything around them, just a few important things that really give us the best simple flavor of the scene.
Yeah.
Yes.
所以这边出现 end up 就是有最后怎么样，那你后面加 VING， 那如果后面是名词，可以加上一个 as， 比如说 he started as an office boy but ended up as head of the firm。
Wow.
他最初是办公室员工，可是他现在是公司的负责人哦。
That's amazing. So you will want to omit a few of these details. When you omit something, Basically, you leave it out. Maybe by accident or maybe on purpose. You might omit things because you just don't have time to do all those things. Or someone might say, hey, you omitted this. And you, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about it. I didn't notice. Thank you for showing what I omitted, what I left out of a category or a group or a list or something like that. For example, Neil omitted to tell his boss that he was taking Monday off. His boss was not pleased. He omitted to tell him. In other words, he probably forgot.
Yeah, maybe he did it on purpose.
He should have.
所以 omit 就是省略或删除。那被什么东西遗漏，其实 be omitted from， 我们就可以这样讲。比如说 some passages were omitted from the book， 书中是有省略一些段落的。不过要注意的是，太多细节也不好哦。如果太多的话，反而会让文章像是在讲述而不是展示了。所以要保留重要的，去省略掉其余的部分。
Okay, the article then says, although writers try to show, not tell, it's important to remember that telling isn't always bad. That's true. Doesn't mean you can never tell people what's going on. You always have to show them. No, sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's more efficient to tell us what's happening, but certainly showing when you can, especially when it's things about sensory things around you, emotions, things like that. And as we said, this is always the case in fiction books. If you're writing a history book or an economics paper, it's a little different. But if you want to engage the people who are reading and make your characters seem more realistic, showing is often the best thing to do.
Yeah.
But not always.
所以呢，虽然就说不要讲述，但其实有时候适时的讲述也是 OK。所以尽可能的展示呢，讲述并不是永远都是不好的啦。好，那我们来看一下另外今天的文法。好的，我们来看一下今天的文法从属连接词。我们刚刚看到 although 跟 though 的用法，它是属于从属连接词，代表虽然、尽管。那通常是连接两个子句，我们可以放在句首、句中或者是句尾。但是放句尾的时候呢，反正大家要注意的就是 although 跟 though 它们带领的从属子句。后方呢要加上一个逗号，去跟主要子句隔开。那在句中的时候呢，就不用加逗号了。好，我们直接看句子比较清楚。Although 或者是 though the sun was shining， 因为这边我们先讲放句首了，所以要有一个 comma 一个逗号。It wasn't very warm。那如果我们今天先讲 It wasn't very warm。那后面呢，我们就不用加了，我们都不用加逗号。It wasn't very warm, although the sun was shining， 或者是 though the sun was shining。那 though 这个字呢，也可以当副词，通常置于句尾，代表不过、但是，是一个语气。比如说 ，Eric is thinking about buying a condo in Taipei. He might not have enough money though.
So yes, as we were saying, while showing, not telling is a great way to engage readers and make characters come alive, telling can also be important, and it can sometimes be really the best way to do things. As it says, it can be an effective way of giving readers useful information. It's true, not everything can be sort of woven into the story in a natural way. Sometimes it's simplest just to say it, just to tell us.
Yeah, 所以一些可能不用太细节的东西啦，你觉得很清楚的直接讲述就好了，它就可以直接跟读者提供很讯息很有效或很迅速、有比较有效率的方式。
For example, you don't need to show readers how characters get from one place to another. Well, that's a good point. You don't need to say they got into a cab. It was a yellow cab. It was a Toyota. They got in from the left-hand side. They sat in the cab. They went three streets down, and then they turned left. They waited at a red light for 2 minutes. A dog crossed the street. You don't need to tell us. You just say they got a cab and then they arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later. Okay, thank you.
所以你不用跟读者讲说比如说啦不用跟读者说角色怎么从一个 A 到 B 这样子 OK 不用
They
讲
took
太
the
细
MRT.
Okay.
Not they went to Zhongshan Fuxing. Bob went downstairs. He got 30 NT from his pocket. He bought a ticket. No, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
Just tell them they took a taxi to the party.
Okay.
You don't need to describe the app they used to get the taxi, what the taxi smelled like, anything like that. Okay. Please don't tell us what the taxi smells like. Okay. It's not interesting.
所以呢，细节不用，你可以直接说他们搭乘计程车去参加聚会，只要一句就可以解决的东西，就一句解决就好。
So that is just one example of where telling is maybe the best way, and you don't need to show. There are, of course, others. But back to the article. If your ambition is to become a writer, especially a writer of fiction, of stories and novels and books and stuff, if your ambition is to become a writer, you'll need to learn when to show and when to tell. It's one of those very, very useful skills that you should have if your ambition is to be a writer of some kind. And ambition is basically something that you want to do in the future, and it will probably be challenging and maybe difficult to achieve, to reach the goal, to be successful. But you know, when someone asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what kind of career do you want to have? Or what do you want to do with your life or something? They're basically talking or asking you about your ambitions, your dreams, your hopes, your desires, the things you want to accomplish and achieve in your life, big or small. For example, Franklin has an ambition to one day walk on the moon.
Wow,
that's a big ambition.
I know, right?
Sometimes my ambition is to make it to Friday without dying. That's a small ambition.
Okay.
I'm really tired and it's only Tuesday.
You're gonna make it.
But I won't walk on the moon this week. Okay. That's next week's ambition.
OK, wow. 所以呢 ambition 就是抱负或志向。那我们通常说实现理想，你可以说 to fulfill one's ambition.
To reach your goals.
Yeah, 所以比如说 she decided to go to great lengths to fulfill her ambition.
Is your ambition to win a Grammy Award? Would that be one ambition of yours?
Maybe Golden Melodies first.
A Golden Melody. That's a good ambition. That's what you can, then you'll get the Grammy a year later.
Working on it.
There you go.
所以他决定不遗余力的呢去实现他的理想。那么他的 adjectives ambitious right 一个人很有抱负志向远大所以如果你的志向是成为一名作家就要学会什么时候使用 show you have to learn how to when to show not to tell or when to show and when to tell
Exactly.
Okay.
And show instead of tell makes it more interesting, usually, but not always. All right, guys, we have time for a chat question. So my ambition is to get to the chat question. I think I'm going to reach my goal if I keep trying.
For you chat.
All right, we're at the chat question. I've reached my goal. My ambition is achieved. Yay!
Wow.
I have other ambitions, and this is not really
That was an easy one.
It was. It's a really good way to always be successful. All right, let's look at the question. It says, showing leaves more to the reader's imagination than telling. Yeah, exactly. And it's nice for the readers to go, oh, that's how he feels, right? We're leaving it to your imagination. It's like a puzzle you have to kind of solve or fill in the blanks. Now, here's the question. Is this a good thing? Or should readers be told everything in a story? Explain your answer.
I think this is definitely a good thing. I think it's the same as writing a song. Like,
Okay.
you don't want to put every detail in your song lyrics. So you have to leave room for your listeners to think about what's going on. So you don't want to make them think, oh yeah, it's about a breakup.
Right.
You have to make them know or let them feel like, oh, it's a sad song. It could be anything.
That's a really good point. And actually, it's one of the things people often say they love about the writing of the words in a song is it means different things to different people.
Yeah.
Right? It can be a song of breaking up with your love in this one, or it could be a story of someone dying. You know, another person says, oh, it's about someone dying. No, it's about someone losing love. It can actually mean different things to different people, which is a wonderful thing, of course, especially about poems and song lyrics and things like that. And I think, yes, as we said in the article, if we're talking about characters in a story, you know, weaving in how they feel and what's going on, weaving that into the descriptions and into the dialogue, it can make it much more personal for the reader because they read it. You're not telling them how they feel, they're describing it, and you're like, oh, that sounds just like me that time when I was sad or something. It makes it more personal and engages your readers much more. And of course, for any writer, songs, poems, stories, engaging the reader is really what you are trying to achieve. That should be your main ambition. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here sometime soon. Until then, I'm going to plod away, sweating profusely, like Todd. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Vocabulary Review. Dialogue. Many people love this play for the wonderful dialogue between its characters. Description. Carl always includes a description of his photos when he posts them on Instagram. He feels words help explain them better. Weave. I want to weave some extra facts about this character into my story, but I'm not sure how. Vision. The driver almost hit a girl when he went around a corner because his vision was blocked by a large tree. Omit. When the long movie was shown on TV, a few scenes were omitted to make it shorter. Ambition. The story is about a boy whose ambition is to become a famous politician.
智慧小补帖
Interact. Surroundings. Sensory.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net